We rely on law and enforcement to ensure our safety and well-being. Imagine what happens when they turn against us and misuse their power for their own gain. It's a havoc situation for sure. How will the crime be committed, and what will be the motive of the cops? Let's find out. FBI arrests East Haven officers for profiling minorities in a tragic case of ethnic and racial profiling. 4 police officers were arrested by the FBI for assaulting illegal immigrants and creating false reports to cover up abuses in East New Haven. These arrests happened as part of a long-term federal investigation into members of the East Haven Department's injustices against the Latino community. According to the federal indictment, the officers assaulted individuals while they were in handcuffs, unlawfully searched and ransacked Latino businesses, and harassed and intimidated individuals who tried to investigate or report misconduct or abuse. These actions drove many newcomers from Mexico and Ecuador to leave the blue-collar city. The 4 officers involved were Dennis Spalding, David Kari, Jason Zullo, and Sergeant John Miller. They were all charged on a 10-count indictment that included executing unreasonable searches and seizures using unreasonable force, arresting 5 people on false pretenses, and then using intimidation and creating false reports to conceal her actions. According to reports, Zullo described taking joy in singling out Latinos. He once told his fellow officers Spalding in a 2008 exchange that he liked harassing drivers. And, in a culinary twist, he referred to those persons who have drifted to this country on rafts made of chicken wings. Talk about creativity. I bet he thought they were secretly auditioning for a new reality show called Raft Chef. Miller reportedly slapped the man handcuffed in his car, while Spalding threw a man to the ground and repeatedly kicked him while he was handcuffed, according to the indictment. All 4 members of the EHPD are purported to have used excessive force during unlawful arrests from July 2007 to 2011. One federal official even called these officers a cancerous cadre of bullies with badges. Spalding and Carey were found guilty of conspiracy against rights, deprivation of rights for making arrest without probable cause, and obstruction of a federal investigation for preparing false reports to justify the false arrests. In addition to that, Spalding was also found guilty of the use of unreasonable force by a law enforcement officer on July 23, 2014. Spalding was sentenced to 60 months of imprisonment, while Kari was sentenced to 30 months of imprisonment on January 21st. Zullo pleaded guilty in order to prevent a possible excessive force investigation. He was sentenced to 24 months of imprisonment on December 16, 2013. Miller pleaded guilty to depriving an individual of his rights to be free from the use of excessive force by a law enforcement officer. Judge Thompson credited Miller for his cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of this matter, and imposed a sentence below the recommended sentencing guidelines range of 12 to 18 months of imprisonment. In 2014, Miller was sentenced to only 4 months of imprisonment, followed by 2 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay a $3,500 fine. The next story deals with the case of 2 narcotics officers who ended up becoming what they were supposed to stop. FBI arrests 2 Columbus narcotics officers in September 2021, named John Koczkowski and Marco Marino, on charges connected to the distribution of fentanyl and attempts to smuggle other drugs. Instead of keeping drugs off the streets, these officers used their authority to smuggle these substances and accept cash payments from drug dealers in exchange for offering their protection. They were involved in the conspiracy for the sale and distribution of around 8 kilograms of fentanyl. In 2021, Marino helped in the transportation of 47 kilograms of cocaine, making $4,500 for his services over the course of a few months. I guess he thought he was going to be the Pablo Escobar of the playground. In the eyes of the authorities, there was no cocaine. Each of these deliveries was under the control of federal law enforcement, while the supposed cocaine was being trafficked. Koczkowski's job was to make any calls Marino might need to protect the shipment, including to other law enforcement officials. Marino swore an oath to serve and protect our community as a law enforcement officer, and instead, he conspired to traffic enough fentanyl to kill well over 1 million people. Marino also tried to recruit a confidential informant to traffic drugs with him. He promised that person that he would protect them if law enforcement ever tried to investigate him. The documents also show Marino intended to gain citizenship in Mexico as part of a plan to launder drug proceeds. Federal authorities had been on Marino's trail for months. Undercover agents disguised themselves as drug dealers and met with Marino on multiple occasions to pull off fake drug deals. Finally, in September 2021, Marino was arrested by the FBI. He implicated Koczkowski in his statement to the authorities and told them that they made an even split from the cash made from their business. I can't help but imagine Marino and Koczkowski in a sitcom about the world's most incompetent partners in crime. During a recorded phone call, Marino said Koczkowski had threatened to have Mourinho's wife and children killed by Sicario, a Spanish word for hitman, if Mourinho spoke about the pair's activities. But as fate would have it, the plot took an unexpected twist. Koczkowski found himself on the other side of the law and ended up in those very same cuffs he once used to intimidate others. Earlier this year, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison by the district judge Edmund. His partner, on the other hand, owned 2 cars, 21 firearms, and had over $500,000. With Moreno, he pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute fentanyl and surrendered these properties as part of the plea agreement. He is yet to be sentenced by the federal court.